So your character, Jonathan,
Yes.
is new. How does he fit into the story?
This is not like the traditional Prince Charming and
Tell
tights.
by the hair.
Yeah, the
That's
hair,
right.
he's
Wearing
kind of
an
scruffy.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
has a hoodie.
Online, his social media saw an uptick in support. Comments poured in, praising him for his professionalism and dignity. Some fans even began sharing clips of his past performances, wondering aloud what Snow White could have been if he'd been allowed to shine. In a world where noise often dominates, Burnap's silence became a statement of its own. He hadn't needed to yell to be heard, and in the court of public opinion, that quiet strength earned him something even more valuable than headlines: credibility. Andrew Burnap's entry into Disney's live-action Snow White was supposed to mark a significant milestone in his career. Cast as Jonathan, a brand-new character created to inject fresh depth into the classic tale, Burnap was expected to be one of the film's standout elements. But what unfolded instead was a glaring absence. From the earliest stages of promotion, fans and industry watchers noticed something strange. Rachel Zegler was everywhere, dominating headlines and interviews, while Burnap was barely visible. There were no solo magazine covers, no featurettes centered around his character, and no sit-downs discussing his role. Social media users began questioning his whereabouts, and speculation took off. Why wasn't he being featured? Had something gone wrong behind the scenes? As the silence grew, so did the suspicion. In an industry where every decision is deliberate, Burnap's invisibility didn't seem accidental. Some suggested he had chosen to stay out of the limelight, but others believed it was the result of calculated exclusion. Rumors started swirling that there may have been creative disagreements, perhaps even conflicts between Burnap and Zegler. While Rachel embraced her role with bold, unapologetic flair, Andrew's voice was absent, his image faded. A co-lead who had been introduced as essential was quietly being erased from the narrative. And yet, his name continued to linger, because in Hollywood, a vanishing act this dramatic never goes unnoticed. Behind the scenes, the dynamic between Rachel Zegler and Andrew Burnap reportedly mirrored the growing tension that fans would later sense from the press circuit. According to production insiders, their chemistry wasn't just lacking, it was cold. On screen, moments meant to feel warm or meaningful between Snow White and Jonathan reportedly fell flat, lacking emotional depth. But it wasn't just about acting, it was about presence, connection, and mutual energy. From the very beginning of filming, it was clear there wasn't much of a personal rapport between the two leads, and this lack of connection trickled down into every facet of the film's rollout. Joint interviews, once a staple of Disney promotions, were mysteriously absent. Red carpet moments where co-stars usually laugh and share excitement felt staged, if they occurred at all. The usual behind-the-scenes banter, the fun TikToks, shared shout-outs, and group photos never came. It was as if Zegler and Burnap were acting in two completely different movies. Internally, some crew members whispered that Zegler was keen on shaping the narrative around herself. Whether due to ego, vision, or strategy, it appeared that Burnap's presence in the film was treated as optional. Speculation began to surface that Rachel may have had a hand in the editing process, influencing how much Burnap's character made it into the final cut. True, this wasn't just a matter of screen time, it was a strategic repositioning of the entire film. For Burnap, it meant standing in the shadows while the spotlight blazed relentlessly on Zegler. And for viewers, it meant sensing something was off, even if they couldn't quite put their finger on it. As the promotional campaign for Snow White picked up steam, one element remained curiously absent: Andrew Burnap. Despite playing Jonathan, a newly created and supposedly central character, his face was nowhere to be seen. Trailers barely showed him, posters and billboards didn't feature his likeness. Even press kits and cast features seemed to forget he existed. It was a glaring omission for someone cast as a co-lead in a high-budget remake. Industry watchers began to whisper that this wasn't simply an oversight, it was an intentional erasure. Reports from insiders only fueled the speculation. Some claimed Rachel Zegler had questioned the need for Jonathan's character early on in production. She allegedly viewed the story as Snow White's alone, without the distraction of a male co-lead. While Zegler framed this perspective as empowering and modern, the consequences for Burnap were significant. As creative decisions evolved, his scenes were reportedly trimmed and repositioned. What started as a fresh narrative arc quickly became disposable. Burnap's dialogue was minimized, replaced, his character arc flattened, and as the final cut emerged, it was clear that Jonathan's presence had been reduced to the bare minimum. It was a sharp contrast from the original concept of his role, and yet Burnap never spoke out. He remained silent as his role, and potentially his career-defining moment, was pushed to the background. It wasn't just a role that was diminished, it was an opportunity quietly taken away. Even in the rare instances where Andrew Burnap and Rachel Zegler appeared together during the promotional period, something felt undeniably off. Observers couldn't help but notice the tension, tight smiles, awkward body language, and an absence of genuine rapport. It wasn't just in public appearances either. Behind closed doors, insiders began to report that the atmosphere between the two leads had become increasingly strained. Burnap, once enthusiastic about the opportunity, had reportedly grown quiet and withdrawn. Zegler, meanwhile, continued to take center stage, dominating interviews and social media with her unfiltered commentary. Some insiders claimed Burnap was deeply disappointed with how the project had evolved. He had signed on for a character that promised depth and significance, but instead found himself minimized in both screen time and press coverage. It wasn't only discouraging, it felt personal. Rumors circulated that Burnap felt betrayed not just by the studio but by Zegler herself, who had allegedly used her influence to push the spotlight away from him. Still, he chose not to voice his frustrations publicly. For fans and industry insiders alike, the contrast between the two stars grew increasingly stark. Zegler, bold and outspoken, became a magnet for controversy. Burnap, soft-spoken and sidelined, was seen as a quiet casualty of the film's internal chaos. As audiences began dissecting interviews and appearances for hidden clues, the growing divide became more than just speculation. It was a reflection of deeper creative and interpersonal fractures, cracks that ultimately shaped how the entire project was perceived. Then came the whispers that turned into full-blown speculation. Several industry insiders began suggesting that Rachel Zegler had done more than just outshine Andrew Burnap. She may have actively worked behind the scenes to reduce his role. Allegedly, her frustration didn't stem just from the backlash surrounding her public comments, it also came from feeling unsupported by Burnap during the height of the controversy. According to reports, Zegler expected him to publicly defend her or at least align with her when the internet began turning against her. But Burnap remained silent, and that silence, it seems, didn't sit well. Sources from the production team claimed Zegler made pointed remarks during meetings, questioning the value of Burnap's character. Some even alleged that she joked, perhaps not so jokingly, about cutting his screen time. Statements like, "This should be Snow White's story, not a shared one," reportedly surfaced more than once. Others from within the creative team hinted that her comments may have influenced how the film was edited, with Jonathan's scenes increasingly seen as expendable. Whether those edits were creatively justified or politically motivated became a hot topic of debate. Though no one came forward with direct evidence, the consistency of these accounts began shaping public opinion. Media outlets started to speculate openly. Fan forums debated endlessly. Zegler was suddenly no longer just a young actress facing criticism for bold statements. She was now potentially at the center of a professional sabotage narrative. And Burnap, once quiet and invisible, became the symbol of someone pushed aside not by poor performance but by internal politics and personal vendettas. Whether it was ambition, damage control, or something more personal, this alleged act shifted the entire narrative of the film's collapse. As the controversy surrounding the Snow White remake reached a fever pitch, Andrew Burnap made a conscious decision. He stepped away. Unlike Rachel Zegler, who remained in the spotlight, often fanning flames with bold comments and social media posts, Burnap went quiet. No press tours, no public defense, no cryptic call-outs, just a few carefully worded messages on his social media, referencing growth through setbacks and understanding when to move on. For an actor who had once been poised for his breakout moment, the silence was telling. Those close to Burnap later revealed that his silence was less about indifference and more about disappointment. He had invested deeply in the role of Jonathan. This wasn't just another credit. It was supposed to be the performance that launched him into the mainstream. And yet, by the time the film premiered, most of his work had been edited down or dismissed altogether. Sources say Burnap felt betrayed, not only by the creative team but particularly by Zegler, whom he had expected to collaborate with, not compete against. Burnap's quiet withdrawal sent ripples through the entertainment world. To some, it was a sign of professionalism. To others, it was a red flag, a symbol of an actor forced into silence by Hollywood's internal politics. But one thing was clear: the narrative had shifted. ended. The man who was once an invisible supporting role was now part of a bigger story, one that hinted at betrayal, sacrifice, and resilience. His decision not to engage in public drama may have cost him temporary exposure, but it won him something more important: respect. As the dust began to settle around the chaos of the Snow White remake, something unexpected started to happen. Andrew Burnap, once the invisible man of the film, began gaining quiet admiration, while Rachel Zegler continued to draw fire from both critics and fans over her controversial remarks, political opinions, and public behavior. Burnap's restraint was starting to speak volumes. Audiences, particularly those critical of Zegler's dominant role in the project's drama, began to view Burnap as a silent professional, someone who tried to do his job and got caught in the storm. Contrast between the two stars couldn't have been clearer. Zegler, often outspoken and unfiltered, had become a magnet for media controversy. Burnap, meanwhile, didn't say a word against his co-star, the studio, or the final cut of the film. His decision to quietly bow out rather than escalate the situation resonated with many who saw in him the very qualities Hollywood often lacks: grace under pressure and a refusal to fan flames. Online, his social media saw an uptick in support. Comments poured in, praising him for his professionalism and dignity. Some fans even began sharing clips of his past performances, wondering aloud what Snow White could have been if he'd been allowed to shine. In a world where noise often dominates, Burnap's silence became a statement of its own. He hadn't needed to yell to be heard, and in the court of public opinion, that quiet strength earned him something even more valuable than headlines: credibility. In the end, Snow White didn't just fail at the box office, it became a symbol of Hollywood's internal fractures. Rachel Zegler's once meteoric rise hit a wall of criticism, while Andrew Burnap, the forgotten co-star, walked away with quiet dignity and growing public support. Whether or not Zegler intentionally pushed him aside may never be confirmed, but the damage is done. The fallout from this film didn't just affect one movie, shifted careers, revealed industry dynamics, and reminded everyone watching that in Hollywood, the loudest voice doesn't always win the story.